Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to talk about something very special related to context grounding. In the previous videos, we discussed how to create an index in context grounding in UiPath, and then we also discussed about how to update these indexes time to time when the data changes. Today, we are going to focus not about updating the index, but we are going to focus more on how to query the data from the index. So, how do we query? Based on our previous examples, it was mostly done by getting the user request and passing that directly to the index through the content generation activity. So let me show you one example. So this is how we did in our previous example. We took the input directly from the user and that directly went to content generation which is connected to our index, and we generated a response. This is possible, but there are scenarios where this is not possible directly. So in scenarios like in a conversational assistant or in a contact center, for example, where you have back and forth communication happening between the user and the assistant. Sometimes the latest message that you're sending may not have all the information that is required to do a search. For example, you're saying you need to query about how to reset your password, and you're not being very specific, like on which application. So the assistant is asking back in which application, and in your response, you're saying, let's say SAP. So, in the latest response, you only have mentioned SAP as the word, but it doesn't have anything about your previous conversation. And if you send that SAP to content generation, it will not give you a meaningful result because it doesn't have your previous conversation. So, these are little instances where you need to um, rephrase your request and make it better and more context aware so that it can get a better result in your context search or in the search that you are doing in your index. We are going to see how we can do that with the help of content generation and also um, another activity called context grounding search. So let's see how we can do this and what's this new activity. Context grounding search. This is a new activity that is again available in the same GenAI activity package as we have been discussing with in our previous videos as well. So what is the specialty about this activity? So this is the documentation. So as you see here, this activity is mostly used for getting relevant context out of your indexes. But there is a very special scenario. This is used when you need to use a different search query instead of the actual user input. So what do we need to give as the input? Is the user input, basically the fine-tuned user input, and the orchestrator folder where the index is and the index name. And that gives us a set of results that we can use to generate a response. So this activity, the main difference between the context grounding search and the content generation is content generation is mostly focused on generating content and if needed connecting with your index and getting the data and generating the response. But in scenarios where we need very specific prompts to generate the data, like to retrieve the data, that's when context grounding search is helpful. So this is how the activity generally looks like. So we can provide the input text, we can provide the folder and the index. This has several outputs. It's a search object and also the search result. We can see how these values looks like as we progress in our video. But there are a few options that you need to consider, like the number of results, meaning when you do the search, how many results do you need as the response from the index. So you can take like 3, 5, depending on what you need. And the threshold is like how relevant the data should be. So by default, it is set to 75%, meaning you can have data starting from 75% or higher. So that's what you need to know about the activity. And let's see how we can actually use it in a workflow. So as we did in our previous workflow, we had the input dialog and then we had a content generation activity to actually generate a response. But what I'm doing something different here. So this is my flow that I partially created for the video. So the first part is the same. We have a simple input dialog to capture the user query. And then I'm having a content generation activity, but this time I'm setting the content context grounding to none. There is a reason for this. I don't want to use the index immediately. I want to use the index a bit later, but right now my focus is getting the proper prompt to do a search because of the same reasons I explained before. And not just that, that also can be scenarios where you have more than one index that you need to query to provide some data to to a query. So in such cases, this content generation activity by default can connect to one index. But using that new activity, we can connect to different indexes. So you can build your and configure your flow and generate different variations of your prompt and pass that to those indexes and generate the result. So what I'm doing here with this content generation, I'm using a system prompt. I'm specifically giving some instructions. I'm saying this is an expert into this research paper because my index, as you have seen in the previous videos, is all about some COVID-19 research papers. So I'm giving some instruction here to basically say that to capture the user intention and following these instructions, rephrase my question and structure it in a much better way so that I can do a better search. This will give better information in the prompt and remove all the unwanted information. For example, you can say that, hey, I'm Lahiru, I'm from this country, I want to know how to reset a password. For the index, does it really need to know that this guy is Lahiru or whether he is from Sri Lanka? No. It needs to know from what application and what you want to do. So we can remove all the unwanted info and make it better. Not just that, you can even make it better by providing more context and making your query more specific based on your conversation history. So these are different things that you could do with the content generation to optimize your queries. But that doesn't mean that you need to replace the actual user query. This can be a separate variable that you're creating, and you can use that to do the retrieval and then use the actual query along with this to generate a nice response. So this is my system prompt. I have actually added a simple write line here so that we can see how it changes my script. Let's quickly run this and then we'll have a look at the next steps. So since my research paper or the index is all about COVID-19, let me just ask a question So I'm saying, hi, I'm Lahiru. I want to know about the virus. What virus? What is it? I'm not specifying. But if you now look at the output panel, let me copy this to a better place. So if you see here, it actually gave a refresh my whole question into a much better way. So this is how your queries can be optimized, and this is how these things can be used to do a better search. Now using this, let's see how we can do a search. Now we are going to use that new activity, context grounding search, right over here. And I'm going to say my input text is the fine-tuned query, and orchestrator folder path is the GenAI folder, and this is my index. And I'm going to capture the search result here. Let's see what this looks like. So let me add another write line. Index search result is a string, but let's also create this other object. So during the runtime, we can actually see what this is about. Now let's add a breakpoint over here and let's do another search. And I'm going to ask the same question. So it's first going to refresh my question so you can see it has some additional info. Yeah, so this time it kind of added a few more information as if it's trying to write a email. Let's make it better. It's good that this happens so you can actually see how we can work on these things. Maybe we can also say yeah, so I'm just adding this. Let's see how that makes it better. Let's try it again. So with these GenAI models, sometimes you also need to do a little bit of trial and error to figure out what's the best instruction, what's the best way to handle different scenarios. And before running it again, let's actually look at one of these documents to see what we can ask. Okay, let's have a quick look. Yeah, so we can ask about key lessons, for example. Let's see. Yes, and you can see this is how it kind of refreshed my question. And over here in the index search result, we have some results over here. So this has some information. It's quite lengthy. And let's have a look at this info. Let me put it into our notepad over here. This has a lot of information. So let's see how the structure looks like. So the first of all, we have the source from which document this information is coming from, the content from this document. So basically this entire section is the content. It's a very lengthy section. And down here, let's see what we have. Yeah, it comes up to this point, and it also says this is the page number and page number 1. Then another source, which is this document, the content, and it keeps on going. So basically, here is the next page. So basically, this text has the content retrieved from the document, and it also has the information about which document and the page number. Let's see what this object has for us. In here, let me copy this as well to our thing over here. And it also kind of has the same information, but in a little bit of a structured way. So if needed, you can actually access this information individually. Yeah. So basically, we get the result from the context grounding search using this activity. Now, this text version, the string version of this, we can actually use it for content generation activity to generate a response, because right now what we have is a lot of information that was picked from different documents from here and there. That doesn't help me. I don't want to read all that. I want to know the actual response for my question. So what we can do, let me copy this two queries and also the fine-tuned one just in case. Yes, now let's add our activity. So this time I'm going to use the content generation. And again, I'm going to use it without the context grounding index because I already retrieved the data from the index. So let me use GPT-4o. This is my prompt, which is actually our fine-tuned prompt. Because this is my actual query, the query that I use to retrieve the data. And the system prompt, I can say you're a helpful assistant in exploring. So I wrote a quick prompt here that says you're a helpful assistant in understanding and analyzing these reports. And he's given with the user query and the actual information from the index, and this information contains the document name, the page number, and the content. And you must use this information to generate a nice response. So this is my instruction. And in the prompt, we only gave the user query, but we forgot to give the data we collected. So we should say we must put it in a meaningful way so that the model can easily understand what this information is. This can be the user query. And then I'm saying, and below this, I'm going to add, let me check the variable name. It's index search result. So there's my query. So let's see how good this is in generating a response for me. And let me keep it down here and get an output For this top generated text, uh, let's say response. And I also want the citations as a result of this. And I'm going to print both here. So now let's see how this works in our new query. So this is the query. I'm going to ask the same question, and we have some answers here. So under response, this is my response. So basically, it has some information. You can consider several areas, and here you go. So basically, this is how we use the activity to do some specific search and improve your prompt. You do some specific search, retrieve the data, and generate a nice response based on all the information you collected, probably from one index or from multiple indexes. So this explains how you can, use the content generation not just to generate content or generate responses, but to generate better prompts based on the actual user prompt that you get and use it for better search and collect the information to generate a nice response. I hope this helps to understand the new concept that I'm trying to explain here and also the use of this activity. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you for listening. I'll see you in another video.